So this morning we are privileged to have with us Doug Ruchek, who's actually a former Medtronic employee. I saw him getting a couple hugs before here, so actually you still have some acquaintances within PXM. So Doug was a longtime employee at Medtronic before experiencing some health problems and getting a much more visceral experience with the product that he had interacted with before. So please join me in welcoming Doug as he tells a story.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for having me. Hello, Galway. Nice to see you. This is actually, hi. It's actually my third time being up on this stage telling my story. And it's a little different this time. I'm going to tell you a slightly different story than I think you usually hear from patients. I'll start off with a little bit about me. I was with Medtronic for 14 years. I joined in 1997. I worked in 4 different divisions total, and I worked in 4 different functional groups. So I was in education, training education. I was in customer service. I was in healthcare economics and in quality. And then at the end of my career, I was also in international reg affairs. So I've been around Medtronic quite a bit. This is my family here, my 2 boys, Sal and Anthony. They're 12 and 10 now. This picture's a little old. And my wife, and if you recognize her, you may, because she is a Medtronic employee as well. She's been here for 20 years and is a director of global marketing for high-powered devices in the cardiac division. So a little weird that we both kind of worked with both of the devices that I ended up getting. It's kind of a strange feeling to have a hand in, what is actually in my body. So what I'm going to do today is I am going to tell you my story. But I've seen about 100 patient stories, and I love them all. They're great. I've got my favorites. But what I noticed as a former employee and now as a patient is that there is so much more to the story that you don't hear. So I'm going to try and give you a little bit of insight into what happens after, the part you don't hear. I'm going to point out some opportunities for Medtronic, because there are some tremendous opportunities for Medtronic in this realm. And then I'm actually going to send you away with a little assignment. So let's start here with my story. It started actually right here in PXM in 2010. I joined in 2009, and between the day that I was hired, where I was told, you're going to be working on this and this and this, and 3 weeks later when I started, the FDA came in and gave us a warning letter. So the first day I showed up, my boss said to me, everything we talked about that you were going to work on, forget it. You're working on fixing the warning letter. So I was a point person on fixing late MDRs. At the time, we were averaging between 300 and 600 every 2 months. I was a point person on working with our international groups, which we really didn't communicate with at the time. So we weren't getting complaints from China and a lot of our Asian countries. So I was a point person on there. And then I also worked a lot on improving processes and procedures and just trying to streamline everything. But in 2010 or so, I started getting these little symptoms where I would get up from my desk or get up from bed in the morning and I'd get lightheaded or I'd get tunnel vision. And it would just last for a second or two. Really didn't give it much thought. And that progressed up into October. What happened in October was, and this was the lightheadedness, the racing heart. I'd be laying in bed and all of a sudden my heart would take off. Why was it doing that? I'm at a resting heart rate and all of a sudden it's 120, 130 beats a minute. Then it would go away. In October, though, I had an incident early on Saturday morning, about 2:30. Our son woke us up, and in the process of getting him back to bed, all of a sudden I got tunnel vision and started sweating and was lightheaded, and kind of made my way back into the bathroom and sat down and leaned up against the wall because it was nice and cold. And I was there for about 2 minutes and felt great, so I thought, okay, I'll get back up and help my wife get our son back in bed. And when I got up, all the lights were off. Everybody was in bed. And I said, where's Sal? And my wife said, he's in bed. And I said, well, that was quick. And she says, honey, you've been in bed in the bathroom for about 15 minutes. And I couldn't account for that time. Now, what I think it was pretty stressful time at work. Also, my wife was traveling quite a bit, so I was kind of managing the house while she was gone. And also, it was the night after Friday night, where I'd been to a party with my brother and maybe had partaken a little too much that night. Really, I passed it off. But that changed in July of 2014, when we were at a friend's cabin. There were a whole bunch of families there, friends of ours, and we were having a great weekend. And somebody had an extra camper there, and my boys wanted to sleep in the camper. And my wife's not much of a camping person, especially when there's a nice warm bed in the cabin to sleep in. So she decided to sleep in the cabin. My boys and I slept in the camper. Normal night, sat around the campfire talking and having a good time. We went to bed about 11, woke up around 5. And I'm the kind of person, once I wake up, I'm awake. I'm not going back to sleep. I tried to, but I couldn't. So about 5:30, I got up and went to the bathroom and I checked on the boys, and then all of a sudden, I woke up looking at the ceiling. And it was odd. I was angry at myself. And so I rolled over to get up. And as soon as I pushed my body up off the floor, I blacked out again. And I was on the ground. I woke up right away. I know I did. And when I did, all sorts of crazy things were going on. It started with syncope. My heart was just racing. I was sweating through my clothes, short of breath. I couldn't catch my breath at all. Lightheaded, seeing stars, tunnel vision, everything. It was real crazy. The best description I can give of my heart was gears grinding. That's what it felt like in my chest, with these gears grinding. And I just couldn't catch my breath. And it's the only time in my life I actually felt like I was going to die. And I was pretty sure I was going to die right there on the floor of a camper in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, and no cell coverage to speak of. So the thing that really caught me, though, as I'm going through this, is that if I died right there, my boys were going to find me, my 2 boys. And so the rational thinking going on in my mind is if I could just get back into bed, that would be okay. I could die in bed and they wouldn't find me. It would be someone else. And so I struggled to get back into bed. And when I got back in bed, it was about 10 minutes to 6. So it took me 20 minutes to go about 12 feet. Just couldn't gather the energy to do it. Now, my heart calmed down quite a bit after that. About an hour later, my son got up, and as soon as he woke up, I said, "Hey, buddy, come here. I need you to do something." He says, "Yeah, sure, hang on," and I hear the bathroom door shut. So I had to wait a minute. But he went and got my wife, and everything, actually, my heart felt fine. I was just really tired and weak, and I was afraid to sit up on my own. So she helped me get into the cabin where there were more people. I took a nap. I had lunch. I felt great after that. I drove home part of the way. But we decided it was time to go to Minneapolis Heart Institute, and I forget what I had next on my thing here. Uh-oh. Am I backing up? I'm backing up. That's why. There we go. We did a stress test. I found nothing. And the doctor said, I know you guys are a Medtronic family. Rather than do a Holter monitor, why don't we go to a Link? And so we did that. 7 weeks later, walking through the kitchen, we're getting ready to go to a party, and I felt that wave again of lightheadedness, of tunnel vision. It was enough for me to grab the counter and say, I got to sit down. And before I could even sit down, it was over. It was done. It was, 3 seconds, maybe. But this is what Link captured. And this is 4 to 5 seconds of non-sustained ventricular tachycardia. This is the key to everything that happened after this. My doctors were pretty clear that without this picture right here, we wouldn't know that this is a cardiac issue. It could be neurological. It could be related to diet. It could be a number of any other things. But because of this picture, we knew this was cardiac related. I spent 3 days in the hospital after this, testing, trying to figure out what was the problem. They never found the problem. There was nothing they could ablate because they couldn't tell what the problem was. So I had I needed to leave with an ICD. So actually 5 days after I arrived, I left with an ICD in my chest. So I now have an Avera. Now, I'll tell you the other part of this real quickly. First of all, the link removal. My link was put in incorrectly. It should be up and down or diagonal. It was put in left or right. So every time I laid down on my left side, which is how I like to sleep, it was burrowing itself to the right side, which is pretty painful. And it was actually coming up under the skin. So my shirt would rub against me, and that would hurt. My kids would headbutt me, and that would hurt. It would drop me to my knees. So it had actually moved about 1.5 inches to the right. The Avera implant did not go well. My heart doesn't like to be cardioverted, apparently. It doesn't like to be captured with shocks. So I failed 8 DFT tests and was shocked externally 3 times. Then they added an extra coil so they could shock lead to coil. That worked out great, except that coil dislodged later. So 2 months later, I was back again. And this time, all hell broke loose. I failed 16 DFT tests. I was shocked externally 8 times. I was really beat up after this experience. Everything is good now. I just had a really rough experience. And yes, everything's been reported to PXM. You don't need to report it again. Don't worry. I was probably in some of those reports that were being read about Link. Yeah, this is my nurse both times. This is our greyhound, Lola. Dogs have a really good sense of knowing when you're in trouble. So, that's my patient's story, and that's usually where stories end. But, I was at Medtronic for 13 years at that point. I worked with doctors and nurses and clinics and hospitals and payers and reps and with patients and their caregivers I worked really closely with them, so I really thought that I had a good understanding of our patients. I thought I understood what makes a patient tick. And I learned I didn't. I didn't have a good idea at all. What I wasn't prepared for, what I knew in product knowledge, I did not understand the physical, emotional, and psychological toll this would take. I had no idea. That's why I left Medtronic a couple of years later, in 2015. I wasn't ready to handle this. And there's where the opportunity lies for Medtronic. Nobody prepares a patient for this. Your doctors don't, your nurses don't, the reps don't. There is no getting you ready for life after a device. What I used to think was, well, you've got your device now. Everything's good. You can be healthy again. And it's just not the case. Patients suffer incredible levels of anxiety and fear and depression. If I were to ask you, and I'm not because it's a very personal thing, but if I were to ask you if any of you have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, in a room of 100 people, about 7 of you would raise your hand. That's normal. The studies show with device patients, it's well over 40%. And it's really a fear of what their device can do to them. Yes, it's going to help them and save them. They're afraid of what it's going to do to them after that. Patients have fear of going just on vacation because they don't want to walk through airport security. They are afraid of running marathons or being active because they're afraid of what their device will do to them or what if their device will fail them. So these are kinds of the opportunities that Medtronic has. As an industry leader, as the experts in what devices can and can't do, Medtronic can lead the way in educating patients. It's really hard to rely on doctors. I see my doctor once a year for 20 minutes. It's really hard to educate a patient in that time. Reps don't have the time to do this. They're usually not spending a lot of time with patients. Clinicians don't have the time. There are a whole number of tools and services that Medtronic could develop for their patient to be patient-focused, to really encourage patients to be active, to get back toward full life. And Medtronic could really do a lot better in patient engagement. I'm an anomaly. I used to work here. I'm pretty knowledgeable about devices. I am actively seeking engagement with Medtronic, and I'm having a hard time finding it. This is good. This is real good. But most patients don't get this kind of experience. One other thing that can be done, more patient inclusion in your projects. Having an actual patient perspective on your team would be incredibly helpful to patients, especially if you're designing a tool or a service for patients, the end user. It'd be great to have their perspective on a team. I think you'll learn a lot. So what can you do in your role and in your future roles? First of all, in this role, remain vigilant in what you're doing. I know what you did. I used to do what you did, or what you do now. You are on the front lines, along with the field. You're the front lines of patient quality. You're the front lines of patient safety. So the fact that I'm confident in my system is a result of the work that you do. So keep doing that. In meetings, be the voice of the patient. When you go to a meeting, let's say a product planning meeting, you're developing a new product, and you're the quality representative there, and clinical is there, and marketing and sales and regulatory affairs are there. The groups that are being represented in that meeting are those groups: clinical, quality, marketing, sales, reg affairs. The patient isn't being represented there. They are in the background, but they're not being represented truly in product development. So if you're developing an app that's going to be used by patients, be the voice of patients. Try to understand how a patient will use something like this and how it will benefit them. And that goes into the third part. Involve your patients. When you're a part of a project that you are developing something, a tool, a service, you can actually bring patients on board and help them develop these tools. I have this quote in the middle here. How do you be the voice of the patient in a meeting? Ask yourself, ask the team, is what we are doing really in the best interest of the patient? Is really what's best for the patient? Sometimes what you're doing is really great, but there could be more that could be done for a patient. So is what you're trying to accomplish really what's best for the patient, or is there more that we can do? These are the things that you can do in your role today and also as you go out beyond PXM into future roles. And when I think about this whole adventure now, from being an employee to being a patient who had a really rough recovery to Now kind of being a patient advocate, I'm connected with thousands of patients on social media and helping them understand how they can live with their device. This is the thing that I always have to come back to. This is the key right here. This is 5 seconds of my life. I was 40 years old at this time. This is 5 seconds of my life that was critical to my diagnosis and my treatment. And you guys captured it. Like, this is what I needed, and you guys did it. So you should be really proud of the work that you're doing. And there's a lot more work that can be done that I encourage you to really pursue. Because it's important to me, obviously. This is my life. This is important to me. But recognize that there are webs of people around me who are also very happy that you're doing the work that you're doing. It's not just my family. It's my friends. It's all these people around me that they worry about me. And I tell them, hey, don't. I've got the best I can possibly get. I'm comfortable. I'm safe. I'm secure. And that is in large part to the work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much, and thank you from our patients, too.